Winston Churchill famously said you can always count on Americans to do the right thing, after they've tried everything else. What are some good examples that prove or disprove this quote's accuracy? Why does this sound like someone's homework assignment? Edit. Would love to see one of those YouTube channels make a video about this thread with the robot voice, and the incredibly long answers. Florida man stories can prove and disprove this. In the specific context of World War II, the British warned the U.S. upon entering the war to adopt the convoy system for shipping, but the U.S. refused to, until they finally did because shipping losses to submarines became too high. The British also told the USA that bombers would need to have a fighter escort or would suffer horrendous losses on bombing missions, but the USA sent bombers in without escorts because they were convinced that they were sufficiently capable of defending themselves. The USA suffered horrendous losses on bombing missions until they started sending fighter escorts to protect them. The Voting Rights Act. Not a great example, but another great quote by Otto von Bismarck: God has a special providence for fools, drunkards, and the United States of America. From World War II itself, after Britain had spent quite some time learning through costly trial and error the methods of escorting merchant ships through U-boat-infested waters, the U.S. Naval Command, particularly one stubborn admiral whose name I can't recall, proceeded to ignore all their advice for weeks to months. Hundreds of tons of merchant shipping from the U.S. were sunk due to insufficient escorts and convoy formations. There is nothing more odd than teaching American history to non-American students. Tuesday, Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. Wednesday, slavery. Pass me a cigar and a large bottle of brandy, I'm gonna take you out prematurely like your family. Dub C. Democracy is the worst form of government except for all those other forms that have been tried. Long form: many forms of government have been tried, and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time. Winston S. Churchill. I believe Churchill attributed the quote to someone else but can't find a reference. Edit. I know this is slightly tangential to Op's question, but I view it as Americans observed other states trying governmental forms, like monarchies, etc., and chose the right form. Wow, first award and it's a gold. Thank you, anonymous Reddit user. Disprove: Native American policy prove, eventually saying duck it and going to war to end slavery. TBF: it probably applied just as much to him as it did to Americans. The Suez Canal crisis. An independent Egypt noted that the Suez Canal was in Egypt and nationalized it, paying all of the shareholders of the Suez Canal Company the current price of their holdings on the Paris Stock Exchange. Then the UK, Israel, and France invaded Egypt and seized the canal. The United States demanded they withdraw, and threatened to sell all the U.S. Treasury's British bonds and wreck their economy. The U.S. didn't blink, just condemned close allies for imperialistic behavior and threatened serious action to stop them, after which they withdrew. After this humiliation, the British and French empires gradually fell apart, and two allies against communism were greatly weakened, but it was the right thing to do. We didn't side with Germany in World War I. Edit. Let's all stop fighting over this. I have my own opinions and you have yours. Reminds me of this story, not sure if it's true or not, where this American soldier is returning from a war and can't find a seat. Eventually they find a seat being occupied by a woman's dog. He asks her to move the dog and she refuses multiple times, so he throws the dog out of the window. Then this British guy turns around and says, "You Americans get everything wrong. You use a fork with the wrong hand, you drive on the wrong side of the road, and now you've gone and thrown the wrong bee out of the window." Just a couple of months ago, the wife of an American diplomat killed a 19-year-old biker in the UK and then ran for the hills. She has to answer for what she did. Americans like me sometimes accidentally do the right thing, so ha. I think this applies less to Americans, rather than the human race as a whole. Probably yet another thing Churchill never said. The fact that they don't use the metric system. Disprove? M1 Garand. It wasn't the best infantry rifle we could have picked, but it was good enough and we could mass produce it enough. We were fully equipped with the main battle rifle 10 years ahead of everyone else in World War II. Winston Churchill was also a profound racist and warmonger. Couldn't really give a shit what he has to say about us. It's not meant to be accurate, it's meant to prove a point. America gives more money to foreign countries than anyone. America passed a constitutional amendment to ban the sale and production of alcohol. Then they passed an amendment to reverse it after they realized they ducked up. The good old USA banned pretty much everybody from Asia and the Asian Pacific from attaining full citizenship for ages, with some of the big examples being the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and the Immigration Act of 1924. Then in the 1950s, the Soviets pointed out how hostile Americans were towards Asia, and suddenly the federal government had a completely different outlook regarding them. They only stopped being racist against Asians on an institutional level because it would help slow the spread of communism, not because racism is a bad thing. I can think of example that proves it slightly wrong. During Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971, you can read about why, but just wanted to include, it was not like a communist revolution and Bangladesh was seeking to be a secular democracy. The United States took the side of then West Pakistan, now Pakistan, despite it being a very repressive regime and the Pakistani army committing genocide and genocidal rape during the war. The United States government was fully aware of it. American diplomat Archer Blood informed the government to the extent of the genocide through what is now called the Blood Telegram. To this day, the government of Pakistan does not recognize this and neither does the United States. The Civil War. They tried every kind of compromise to avoid a war and finally it was a war that settled it. America has done the right thing multiple times, but they have never launched 30,000 pounds of shit into orbit and then shot it down with a laser. Just the fact that that scenario remains unexplored means America hasn't tried everything else. Healthcare comes to mind. Churchill also asked a woman one time if she would sleep with him for $1 million. She said of course I would. He then asked would you sleep with me for $50? She replied Mr. Churchill what kind of woman do you think I am? He responded with, that has already been established, now we're just trying to figure out a price. We initially supported the Kurdish forces in Syria but are now leaving them to the wolves. Iran. First you remove a democratic elected and probably Western-friendly possibly long-term stable president to reinstate the Shah, who ruled with terror and created the basis for a long-term enemy. This was all to secure oil, probably lots of oil, which was and still is very important. Reinstating the Shah showed a lack of vision. Then you support Saddam Hussein, another man of great stature, to start a war against Iran that costs many billions and many lives. But most of that money flows back to American weapon manufacturers, and those lives are not American so who cares? Oh and cheap oil. That war is lost or not won, but at least Iran is set back another decade or two, and Iraq is still more dependent on the US. Now you got an Iran that is out of control, although I still think the people of Iran are still a reasonable, rather liberal and friendly people, friendly to the West as well. But well, that doesn't matter, so you retract from the nuclear treaty so you know for sure that those nuclear bombs are coming. Verdict, the US probably haven't run out of stupid ideas, and certainly haven't done the right thing here. Oh, is it time for AskReddit's daily bitch about America thread? Nixon's impeachment. Everyone forgets that Nixon was very popular before he resigned. Hell, in 1972 https://n.m.wikipedia.org Wiki 1972 United States presidential election he had been re-elected with 60% of the popular vote and a 550-17 electoral college victory. His approval ratings fell to 25% after the Saturday Night Massacre, but only 40% thought he should be removed from office. It wasn't until the tapes came out that a majority believed he should be removed. He resigned shortly after that. https://www.pewresearch.org Content uploads 201906ft14.08.08 Nixon resignation 2x.png W640 edit, fixed it made sense. Don't comment first thing in the morning kids. Ran into Vietnam when it was none of their ducking business. Tried to fight. Got absolutely destroyed. Went and massacred villages of innocent people. Claimed it as a victory. Used chemical warfare like a child with a water gun and fucked up tons of civilians, where the effects show in newborn children even today. Got tons of their own soldiers unnecessarily killed under the guise of freedom. Gave tons of Viet vets PTSD thinking they were doing the right thing when in reality they didn't do shit. #X200B, finally, they decided to fuck off out of Vietnam and purportedly attempt to mind their own goddamn business.